Bet you didn't think that this was gonna be a trilogy. Me neither. If anyone had told me before I made the first Kissing the Coronavirus video that this was gonna be part of a series, like there were gonna be 2 more books after that, I swear I wouldn't have touched that thing with a 10-foot pole. I don't even know why I read the first book. It was out there. I was curious. I was like, you know, why the fuck not? And somehow there was like a sequel. And now there's a sequel to the sequel? Why are there 3 books? 3 erotic books about kissing the coronavirus? This is gonna be the last book in the entire series, and I kind of cheated a little bit this time. Unlike the first 2 books where I read them like live so that you could get like my genuine bewildered commentary, this time I chose not to do that and I read the book beforehand. I took so much damage from the sneak attack of the second book, like from the very first sentence.
Dr. Kelly Cauldron sniffed the hot dog into her vagina.
And I thought, like, instead of having a breakdown on camera, let me do that off camera and then I'll come back and talk about it. 2 things. This one is a full, like, it's a female relationship. The first book was like purely like heterosexual. The second book was like a threesome with a little bit of yaoi sprinkled into it. This one is full on Yuri. There is not a single cock or penis or plantain or any other thing in sight. No male genitalia whatsoever. Some mentions of cocks and male genitalia, but they're not going to be playing a part in this one. Secondly, after reading the second book, and just how absolutely gross that book was, being filled to the brim with like nasty ass like food metaphors to describe like sexual acts and like genitalia and anything like sex related, there wasn't as much of that in this one. Like MJ Edwards really held herself back this time. So I'm kind of grateful for that, because that was like the biggest problem that I had with the second book. I can kind of like, you know, get behind the idea of using food during sexual stuff to like, you know, spice up your sex life a little bit, but the moment you tell me that my vagina is like an uncooked mussel, I'm sorry, you've lost me. I am in the corner vomiting buckets. Kissing the Coronavirus 3, The Mutant Strain. So the tagline for this third book is they say the new strain is resistant to vaccines, but is it resistant to sex? Let's fucking find out. Dr. Amy Amison couldn't stop thinking about the incredible sex she'd partaken in not 12 hours before. It was like the entire 4.5-minute act was permanently lodged in her temporal lobe, which is the part of the brain that stores your memories, amazing sexual encounters included. Dr. Amison knew that because she was a microbiologist, and so she had all sorts of intricate medical knowledge. So one of the things that I've noticed in this third book here is like MJ Edwards is like, if you didn't know she was trolling in the first book and in the second book, you'll know that that was fully her intention with this entire series. She knows that her readers are like dumb enough to purchase and read these books, so she's just like playing with you at this moment. Like she's like, oh, you know, like, you know, your temporal lobe, that area of the brain where memories are stored, you know that Dr. Amy Amison is a microbiologist, so of course she knows that. You might not know that, but Dr. Amison knows that because she's a microbiologist and she has medical knowledge, so she knows where sexual encounter memories are stored, in the frontal temporal lobe of the brain, because she's a microbiologist, so she knows. You idiot. Something else she couldn't stop thinking about was the positive COVID-19 test she had received just 10 minutes after that erotically charged moment. She hoped and prayed that she hadn't unwittingly spread the virus to others. She was usually so careful. Blast her inability to control her vagina. Dr. Amison's most recent climatic encounter, which, as mentioned a few sentences back, see, this is what I mean, was half a day ago, had been something to behold. something to behold indeed. Just the thought of it sent her vagina spinning like a thing that spins a lot. Midget spinner. She pummeled at her own breast and chomped on her lips, and her bum quivered at the mere thought of what had happened. She was sitting in her chair in the middle of the laboratory canteen, but it was 4 in the morning, so there was nobody around to see. Besides, even if there was, it would have been simply added to the cheekiness that made her pussy so wet. It was like a sunburnt sea lion. That made her pussy so wet, it was like a sunburnt sea lion fresh out of the ocean. Even her positive COVID-19 test couldn't dampen her sexual spirits. Pity she was alone. The sheer memory was enough to send an orgasm rippling through her body like her vagina had been filled with bees, which sounds painful. If the second book was filled with like all these like gross food stuff related to sex, this one here for some reason is like it's like MJ Edwards has something against vaginas. She describes all these like, how do I say this? All these ways to describe what like a pleasant feeling in the vagina feels like, you know, or is supposed to feel like. And then the way she'll describe it is like, oh, it's the same feeling as when your vagina is filled with bees. I highly doubt that a bee-filled vagina is supposed to feel pleasurable. Like, I don't know what kind of pain kink you are into, MJ Edwards, but, and she describes like all these like vaginal emotions as painfully as possible, and I'm like, why do you hate the vagina so much? This book is like girl on girl action, right? It's supposed to be filled with maybe equally nasty but somehow also like really pleasant like vaginal sensation descriptions, and instead I get vagina bees. Like, I'm not like kink shaming, but it's hard to understand. Start of flashback. Dr. Amison sat on the 252 flight from Finland to North Virginia on her way back from the annual microbiology convention, which was so critical to her microbiological work. She had spent 3 whole days discussing the latest microbiological breakthroughs centered around the coronavirus pandemic. There were several, with colleagues from all across the world, including Professor Theon Wallbreaker, Denmark's leading microbiomedical researcher, who she sucked off in a storage cupboard, but this flashback isn't about him, and Sir Rogerson Tilbert, open parentheses, who she tried to suck off, but he is very old, so he couldn't become engorged. But this flashback isn't about him either. Close parentheses. It was a who's who of celebrities from the microbiological world, which would often just end in science-fueled sex sessions. It was the one and only time in the microbiology calendar where people who understood the human anatomy inside... This is a very long sentence. Hold on, let me start again. It was a who's who of celebrities from the microbiological world, which would often just end in science-fueled sex sessions because it was the one and only time in the microbiology calendar where people who understood the human anatomy inside, literally, and out, literally, got together. When the learning was done, it was time to put the knowledge into practice via sex. In Miss Edwards's head, sciencey people are like a horny lot. They're just like sex crazy, you know, like especially microbiologists. I actually have a friend who's a microbiologist. She's actually doing like research for like the COVID like vaccine. So I need to ask her if she's like horny all the time. But surprisingly, despite the world's top microbiologist, how many times have I read the word microbiologist? But surprisingly, despite the world's top microbiologists being on hand to teach Dr. Amison about her body, even she was yet to discover, it was not during the convention where she experienced her knee-knockingly, world-shatteringly, perception-altering orgasm. No. It was on the 252 flight from Finland to North Virginia. Dr. Amison sat watching her favorite movie, Big Mama's House 2. She sipped a glass of Monet and ate some nuts, wishing there were another sort of nut she could be chewing instead. Open parenthesis. Hey. Close parenthesis. The deep red wine made her lips blush burgundy, which matched the skirt of the air hostess, who handed her another bottle of wine. Wait. Did she wink? Dr. Amison was sure she did. It had been 2 years since the coronavirus pandemic had first snatched the lives and freedoms away from so many people across the world and ruined Dr. Amison's sex life. With wave after wave striking every few months, lockdowns came and went, businesses closed and reopened, and that was the only time Dr. Amison was free to enjoy as much mucky sex fun time as she could handle. And she could handle a lot, which was why it was so frustrating. And she didn't mind what she handled nor on whom. She was happy with the dick, clumsily fucking her soapy tits like an eager Boy Scout, cleaning a car windscreen with a slab of chorizo, a vagina rubbing gently against her forearm like a chewed beef burger, or anything in between. So that was like one of the like food metaphors that is in this book. And it's very tame compared to the second one. Extremely tame. She just loved genitals. She loved touching genitals, kissing genitals, and putting things inside her own, and of course, other people's genitals. The sexual misadventures that had taken place during the microbiology convention were plaguing Dr. Amison's gray matter, which is what she and her microbiology colleagues knew as the brain. Remember, these are sciencey people, so they talk about the human body in sciencey terms. Sure, she had been throat punched by two of the industry's biggest names, even if they weren't the biggest, she thought with a chuckling chuckle. But overall, the convention had been as fruitful as it had been years before. There was a new COVID variation emerging in Scandinavia called the D1K strain, which had been given the amusing nickname of the dick strain. Apparently, it was resistant to vaccines and sat dormant in your system for 12 hours before releasing the infection into your cells. So the congoers were understandably far more concerned about wearing masks and using hand sanitizers than getting their genitals wet. At least they're following the pandemic protocols. Sure, she had learned a lot about the pandemic, doubt, and how microbiologists were doing their part to help keep new mutations of the virus at bay. Also doubt. But what she'd really wanted to come away from the convention with was a feeling of sexual satisfaction that only came from an immeasurable amount of genitalia hitting, tickling, or gouging you in any one of your 5 orifices, which were what microbiologists like Dr. Amison called holes. 5 orifices for sex. As far as I understand, only 3 of those 5 orifices should actually be used for sex. Just painful. Why? Dr. Amison paused Big Mama's house too and climbed clumsily out of her seat, her enormous and perfect breasts brushing the face of the old lady in the seat next to her. The old lady didn't seem to mind, and Dr. Amison wouldn't have minded if she reciprocated either. This is how I know that MJ Edwards is like completely disassociated from like real life, because nowhere in hell is anyone on an airplane okay with their personal space being like invaded. Like, I don't care if it's invasion by vagina, if it's invasion by big busty breasts. She didn't even need to go to the toilet. Dr. Amison just needed a change of scenery. The flight from Finland to North Virginia was a long one, and she was already on her 3rd rewatch of Big Mama's House too. I've never seen this movie. I don't really know if this is like a good movie or not, but either ways, watching the same movie over and over again in an airplane, like when you're stuck in like a 12-hour long flight, like I'm pretty sure they've got like a collection of other movies to watch something else. There was a knock at the door. Just a minute, she said. There was another knock. I'll be done in a second, she said louder. A 3rd knock rapped on the door. 1 minute, I'm nearly done, she said louderer. 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 Then a 4th knock. Dr. Amison huffed. I actually paid for this. Dr. Amison unlocked the door and it concertinaed open like an accordion. Dr. Amison gasped. She felt a tingle in her vagina like she had just dipped it in vinegar. See what I mean? In which universe is dipping your hoo-ha in vinegar a pleasuring sensation? Standing there was the air hostess in the burgundy skirt. She had a tiny upturned smile, like a schoolgirl who knew she was doing something naughty, like using a calculator in an algebra test. Listen, MJ Edwards, No one gets horny while cheating on their tests, okay? Especially if it's a math test. They are too stressed. Their eyes are darting like ping pong balls just to, like, look out for their teachers. No one has a horny, naughty smile on their face when they are cheating during an algebra test. You seem a little stressed, mon chéri, said the air hostess in a seductively alluring French accent. Yes, said Dr. Amison, taken aback by the air hostess's hotness. I can help you with that. I can help you with that. Okay. In here? Asked Dr. Amison. Oui, oui. Her nipples poked through her air hostess blouse like she had brought in 2 extra peanuts, which Dr. Amison couldn't wait to masticate. Masticate, for you non-sciencey people out there, is the sciencey word that science people use to describe chewing. I know some science stuff. Suddenly, without warning, shockingly, the air hostess dove vagina first towards Dr. Amison, and the two locked themselves in an embrace tighter than a Yorkshire man haggling at a car boot sale. Dr. Amison tore at the air hostess's blouse, the buttons twanging off in every direction and shattering the tiny airplane bathroom mirror. She buried her face between her titties, which were big and soft like ripened wheels of cheese. Then it was the air hostess's turn. She pulled Dr. Amison up with such animalistic, lusty ferocity that she sat on the back of the toilet at perfect height for Dr. Amison's knockers to be suckled like a vacuum cleaner on the highest setting. Pleasure so good, it was like she was being stabbed by 1,000 hot knives that coursed through Dr. Amison's skin, from her supple brownish areola right down to her pink surprise, which was her nickname for her vagina. If I were to nickname my vagina, I would call her the Tutti Frutti. Things went all blurry for a moment. Her eyes crossed. Explosions crackled all around her. Was she dying? No, she was living. These sounds were inside her head. Nay, they were inside her vagina, because in that moment, Dr. Amison experienced the most intense pleasuregasm any human being or an animal had ever sensationalized. It was like an entire football stadium's worth of excited fans had stomped down on her pink surprise until she had to clench her teeth and scream, 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 scream. She couldn't believe it. An earth-shattering, or because she was in a plane, sky-shattering orgasm that made her for one brief moment consider asking this woman to be her wife. Then why didn't you? The French beauty obviously felt the same. She took out a mascara pen and wrote her email address, bustyfrenchbeauty69@gmail.com. Is that like your professional email address? Right across Dr. Amison's buttery breasts. Then Dr. Amison went back to her seat with a smile on her face and a skip in her vagina. She watched another 10 minutes of Big Mama's House 2. She laughed. She was relaxed. Until, that is, she got a text. The text said, "Your COVID test results are in positive. Please maintain social distancing. Goodbye." Dr. Amison's heart began to beat faster than a drummer beating really fast. End of flashback. Several moments of sheer intense pleasure, followed by 11.5 hours of worry. Immediately after receiving the text, Dr. Amison had done everything she could to further prevent any possible spread. Did she have the Dick strain of the virus? She was fully vaccinated, so that must have been it. If it was true, if she did have the Dick strain, can't take this seriously. Like, it's called the Dick strain. Then she would be the first person in America with a confirmed case. Then her career would be over and she'd be fired from her job at the lab, and she would never get to go to the annual Finnish microbiology convention ever again. Imagine all the sex she would miss out on. Despite it being the early hours of the morning, the lab canteen door opened and the sexy young intern strutted into the room. She had big tits that could barely be contained within her lab outfit and plump lips that glistened like a droplet of water glistening in the desert sun. Dr. Amison gasped. She covered her mouth and ran from the canteen while the intern called after, asking her if she was okay. But Dr. Amison wasn't okay. If she was honest with herself, she felt absolutely fine, which meant she must have been asymptomatic, which is the word microbiologists use for people who were ill but fine. It wasn't in her department, but her lab had access to a COVID-19 test machine, which was in room 7B. Dr. Amison swabbed the back of her throat with the swab, then swabbed the swab up her nose before placing the swab in the swab reader on the COVID-19 machine. You ever read a word so much in just one go that you start feeling like this word does not exist, like it doesn't feel right, like is this an actual word? She punched in a bunch of numbers she knew, then the COVID-19 machine began to groan and squirm and thud as it read the swab sample. Swab? Swab. She was terrified. She was panicked. She was negative? Sure, she had COVID-19, but she didn't have the dick strain. Thank you, Billy Mungus. I don't know, is that an American thing? Let me know. What was that? She leaned in closer to the screen. It said, new variant found. VG1NA. I don't really understand how these machines work. Isn't it like human people who name these like diseases? Wait, what? Another new variant? And she was patient number 1? Holy Billy Mungus. Dr. Amison ran from the COVID-19 lab to her office, where she threw herself down into her comfy office chair, and after reading the email address, again that had been written across her incredible breasts, she sent an email to the sexy air hostess. Girl, you did take a shower after your flight? Hello, my beautiful. Thank you for that wonderful sex today. However, I come bearing news. Please self-isolate. I have been found to be carrying a brand new variant of the coronavirus known as the VG1NA. Please tell your local authorities. I'm sorry, my princess. Dr. Amison. Dr. Amison's computer blinked. The sexy air hostess had responded. Mon chéri, oui. I have also been diagnosed with the coronavirus. I has the dick strain. All my love, air hostess. You couldn't even bother to like invent a name for her. Her name is air hostess. Suddenly her vagina twinged like she had been stung like by a lustful scorpion. Her breasts thundered together like boulders clashing under a crescent moon. She tried to be a little poetic. Her bottom puckered and a ripple of intense pain and pleasure echoed throughout her body in a cataclysm of erogenous persuasion she couldn't even describe. Her feet hurt. Dr. Amison began to run. She didn't know why. She didn't know where she was going. She just ran and ran until... Dr. Amison, hello, said the sexual intern. You seem flustered. Is there anything I can help you with? Dr. Amison clung to the wall like a gecko. Dr. Amison fell to the floor, clutching her big, beautiful chest. Every muscle in her body ached, but especially her vagina. And then, like a light bulb had sprung to life in her gray matter, the brain, she realized what was happening. Being a microbiologist, of course, Dr. Amison had studied the work of Dr. Gertlichon and Dr. Alexa Ashington Ford and Dr. Kelly. I love that they have all these callbacks from previous books. You can really tell that it's part of the same universe from that. She knew what had happened to them, what turmoil and sex they had experienced. Did these people describe the intense sex that they had as well as part of their research? How the virus had caused them to change, to mutate. And it was happening to her now too. Did Dr. Ashington Ford and Dr. Kelly also mutate into different versions of COVID and the cure after they fucked them? Because if they did, who published their research? The dick strain she had clearly caught from the buxom air hostess aboard the 252 flight from Finland to North Virginia was merging inside her body with the VG1NA strain, the ... vagina strain. Some microbiologist you are not being able to figure that out. The two strains were combining inside her body, rocketing from her genitals to her brain and back again, splicing her cells with the virus, changing her very being from human to something else. The intern screamed a terrified scream as Dr. Amison's skin transformed into a deep crimson shade of red. Tiny bumps grew from her skin, which Dr. Amison instantly recognized as protein spikes. She had never seen them so clearly before, so closely. So sexy. It was a glorious yet intoxicating sight, and the intern had fallen into their spell. But her vagina. Oh, her vagina. It was lean and muscular, like a thick slab of freshly butchered, high-quality meat hanging in an abattoir window. Was it just falling? Like, was it just hanging? Just hanging? Dr. Amison grabbed the intern by the waist and pulled her up until their eyes met. At first, the intern looked taken aback, maybe even a little scared, but then slowly, gently, carefully, their lips met. She held the intern in her hands, now tiny like a tiny doll, with tiny arms and tiny legs compared to her own, which were not tiny. You know how, like, when you have to fill out the word count for a college essay? It was insane. Dr. Amison had no words to describe what had happened or how it had happened. It had just happened. It happened. This is exactly the same way that I described the entire Kissing the Coronavirus series. I have no idea what happened or how it happened. It just happened. It happened. An orgasm slammed Dr. Amison in the ovaries like she'd been shot at with a machine gun. Ratatatata, getting battle royale flashbacks. Except it wasn't bullets she was being shot with, it was pleasure. Over and over and over until she made a roar so loud and grunty it shook the windows, like an earthquake had shifted the very foundations of the building. Except it wasn't an earthquake, it was a pleasure quake. The floor was sodden with juices that had been expelled from the two bodies, from every which orifice, parentheses, hole, the two of them had, including the two orifices that no fluid should be coming from. Y'all need to get checked. It was proof that they had just encountered a sexual release that was unrivaled. Besides, the cleaners would start their shift in 20 minutes and they'd clean it up so nobody would slip on it. What if they slip on it, huh? Where would she go now? What would she do? She was outside the lab. She was a new strain. Clearly the vaccine couldn't contain it. But could she contain herself? She had her doubts. She was here to stay. Unlike the other two who just died after fucking. The last about the author. MJ Edwards is a writer, board game enthusiast, and trainee exhibitionist. How does one even train to be an exhibitionist? Kissing the Coronavirus 3, the mutant the mutant strain came to her in a fever dream, I believe it, after accidentally dropping some of her ferret's worm medication in her glass of rosé. You know what? It makes sense. She is currently on dating app Tinder looking for the next love of her life. Despite 3 awkward dates, a one-night stand, and a man who spoke through sock puppets, she is yet to give up hope. For now, her love for writing will do. Follow her on Twitter, yada yada yada. And that is it. The end of the Kissing the Coronavirus saga. Final thoughts. I kind of wish it didn't exist, but at the same time, I'm kind of glad that it does. It's a weird feeling. That's gonna be it, the end. Let me cleanse my Kindle a little bit. Oh my god, what happened? Oh my god, my Kindle died. I'm only half joking when I said that MJ Edwards has like a future as an erotic fiction writer. But if she ever does plan to release something else, hopefully not coronavirus related, but equally as ridiculous, I might just actually read it just for entertainment, because God knows that times like this we do need a little bit of haha and hee-hees in our life. Anyways, thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you have a great day as well. Hopefully this pandemic will be over so that Miss MJ Edwards has no more source material to draw from for her next book. Stay safe. I will see you in the next one. Bye.